Welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about life, relationships, and being human. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question that you'd like to ask me anonymously, you can go to www.asksean.org. So today's video, I'm going to be exploring actually a question from a recent interview about falling out of love. Like, are we destined to fall out of love? Must we fall out of love? And what do we even mean by falling in love? Like, what exactly is that state? And are there things actually about the kind of the classic falling in love state that maybe aren't actually totally where we should be forever? Is there something actually beyond that that's even richer and deeper and more sustaining? So, yeah, those are some of the things that I explore in this. Yeah. So thinking about the question of like how or why do people fall out of love? I think this is, it's super common. I think even sometimes when like couples start therapy with me, and there will be sort of this question even of, well, maybe this is just inevitable and we're just kind of at this phase where we're just falling out of love, and we just need to suck it up and deal with it. And that they don't totally believe that, or they wouldn't have bothered coming to therapy, so there's a little kernel of hope somewhere there, right? But I think this question speaks to our uncertainty about like what is realistic to hope for, and how does this work? So I don't think that it is a foregone thing that we will fall out of love, or at least not in the way that I mean it. So this is maybe a helpful clarification. So, because there's two ways of thinking, or more probably not just two, but I'm thinking of two different ways of thinking about being in love. So now, if we're thinking about, I guess maybe the more typical cultural idea of being in love, falling in love, it's this whole kind of euphoric experience of, I found the magical other, and so now everything is right with the world, and they're amazing, and I'm amazing, and life is amazing, and it's going to be amazing forever. And that truly is a really fun time. But that period has to end. It is inevitable that will end. And the reason it has to end is because it is always built on I'm trying to think how much to even start to touch on. But it's built on a psychological experience, a psychological process that for the sake of our growth and healing must transition. So one of the principles here that I guess I'll try to just briefly touch on is that part of what attracts us to one another is that there are qualities in the other that are underdeveloped in ourselves. And we don't realize this. This happens on an unconscious level. So sometimes, maybe when you're observing your friends, it can sort of jump out to you, like the quiet one, gets together with the really extroverted one. But this principle is true on even more subtle levels. And so the reason that we have to fall out of love in that regard is that we have to like eventually have that initial fantasy, kind of that bubble burst, so that number one, we discover that, oh my gosh, this is actually a human being, not sort of the angelic being I thought they were, and I'm a human being and not the angelic being they made me feel like I was. We have to be confronted with that, which this is usually the crisis point, where if we can make it through this, then we actually have the chance of what I would say is then a real relationship. That initial period, while it's lots of fun, there's not a ton of reality there. There's a lot of like really exciting fantasy, but there's this invitation to actually grow into reality. And so then this is where, when I say I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that we have to fall out of love, what I mean is that we can actually grow into a kind of deeper and more true love. But what that requires is that we have to be confronted with the ways in which there's parts of us that we have to develop. That some of the things that drew us to the other person in the first place, and that then we become kind of irritated around as we discover like they're actually human and not an angel. Those are things we have to learn how to take responsibility for and own inside of ourselves. Now, kind of all the nuance of that is a much longer conversation. But the point is, in terms of thinking about this question, is that we can actually grow into a much deeper and longer lasting love. And that's a love then it's not built on the fantasy of like, oh, you're all the things I imagined. It's built on the much more earthy, but much more sustaining love of, you are this horrible, beautiful human being, and I'm a horrible, beautiful human being, and we're somehow managing to like find our way through, and like learning how to like each other in much more true and deep ways, and learning how to navigate conflict, learning how to to do the inner work that we need to do, so that we're not just endlessly chasing after fantasies, chasing phantoms in the desert kind of thing. So in that regard, like, I think love can grow and get better and better and better. It's just of a very different kind of quality than what we tend to see in movies. It's of a there in one sense it might have a quieter aspect to it, but that doesn't mean passionless. Like, it can actually be more passionate, but in a different kind of way. I mean, it's hard to explain, but so I think I guess in some ways it's like, I think that the human dynamic with all of this is both much harder and uglier than we want to imagine, but way more hopeful and beautiful than our really initial vision is actually so small. Like that's the thing. Like, the initial falling in love is exciting as that is, and as like addictive as that is, it's really such a tiny vision. I mean, it's kind of like I don't know, it's like the difference between like a little, like, sticker of Disney World and like going to Disney World or something. It's like, you could be, when you're a little kid, like, that sticker can be amazing, but it's like, going to Disney World and like all of like this huge environment that's been constructed, like, that's a whole nother level of experience. That's not a perfect analogy. In a lot of ways it's a very imperfect analogy, but I'm just trying to get at sort of the sense of like, we don't know, in our immaturity, all of us, we're not able to even envision of something that would actually be so much more nourishing and sustaining and life-giving. And so, so we all start at like, that sort of, that younger version, regardless of what our age is. I mean, you can be 50 years old and still going for the younger version of falling in love, because it just matters of like, what have you developed through. But, we all start at that. And then if we can work through the pain that comes up in us as the fantasy starts to inevitably collapse under its own weight, because it must, if we can stick with our pain, and like, if we have enough support to work through things, we have the chance to actually become a more full human being, and to do that in concert with a partner, which, what an amazing thing. And then that really then can create a lifelong love, which is what, I think in so many ways is what we're all longing for. So.